The Cathari arrived without warning. Their ships were unlike anything humanity had ever seen, long black vessels shaped like curved blades, gliding silently through the void above Earth's orbital station, New Geneva. No transmissions, no greetings, just a sudden overwhelming presence that made every sensor on the station scream in alarm. Within minutes, Earth's defense grid went on high alert, but the Cathari didn't fire. They simply hovered, waiting. Down on Earth, governments scrambled. Emergency meetings filled secure rooms from Washington to Beijing. The United Nations Space Council convened in record time, voices tense and faces pale under the glow of holographic displays. For years, humanity had dreamed of first contact, of shaking hands with beings from distant stars, sharing knowledge, maybe even joining a grand galactic community. But this was not the friendly handshake they'd hoped for. This felt like a threat wrapped in silence. Then the message came. It wasn't sent through radio or laser comms. Instead, a single Cathari shuttle detached from the largest ship and docked at New Geneva's neutral bay. Out stepped a figure taller than any human, covered in dark, scaled armor that shimmered like oil on water. His eyes glowed amber, and his voice, when it finally came, rumbled like distant thunder translated through a machine. "We are the Cathari," he said, standing before a hastily assembled group of diplomats and military officers. "We have watched your species. You build, you speak, you fight among yourselves, but you have not yet proven your worth." He paused, letting the words sink in. "To join the Galactic Conquered, you must pass the trial of blood. Choose your champion. Face ours in ritual combat on our world. Win, and you earn your place among the stars. Lose, and you will be marked as unworthy, forever barred from interstellar contact." The room fell silent. The Galactic Concord was real. It wasn't just a myth or rumor. It was a coalition of dozens of alien civilizations that governed trade, travel, and diplomacy across known space. Humanity had petitioned for membership for over a decade, sending peaceful signals, sharing scientific data, even offering cultural exchanges. But now the gatekeepers demanded blood. General Elena Ruiz, Earth's top space defense commander, stepped forward. "Combat? You want us to send one of our people to fight to the death on your planet?" The Cathari warlord, introduced as Vraktor, tilted his head. "Not to the death, to honor. In our way, victory is not measured in corpses, but in spirit. If your champion breaks before ours, your species is weak. If your champion stands, you may stand with us." Back on Earth, panic simmered beneath the surface. News outlets debated the ethics of the challenge. Some called it barbaric. Others saw it as a necessary test. Military leaders pushed to send a soldier, maybe Captain Marcus Bell, a decorated veteran of the Mars insurgency, known for his strength and calm under fire. But diplomats argued that brute force might insult the Cathari further. This wasn't just a fight. It was a ritual. And rituals had rules deeper than violence. That's when they turned to Daniel Hayes. Daniel wasn't a soldier. He wasn't even particularly famous. He worked in the Department of Xenocultural Affairs, a quiet branch of the diplomatic corps most people forgot existed. He'd spent the last 12 years studying alien languages, customs, and belief systems, often alone in dimly lit archives or on long-haul observation missions to fringe colonies where first contact had already happened. He spoke 7 extraterrestrial dialects fluently and could recite the funeral rites of the Zenthar hive from memory. But he'd never fired a weapon in anger. He preferred tea to tactics, silence to speeches. When the call came, Daniel was in his small apartment in Denver, reviewing old Cathari trade logs from a century ago, records recovered from a derelict freighter near Proxima Centauri. He listened as Director Paula Finch explained the situation, her voice tight with urgency. "They want a champion," she said, "but we think they want more than a fighter. We think they want someone who understands what the fight means." Daniel set down his cup. "And you want me to go?" "We want you to lead the delegation. If we send a soldier, they'll see us as warriors. If we send a scholar who respects their ways, maybe they'll see us as equals." He didn't answer right away. He looked out the window at the snow falling softly over the city. He'd read about the Cathari. Their society was built on honor, silence, and the belief that true strength showed not in how hard you hit, but in how still you could stand when everything around you demanded action. Their duels weren't about killing. They were about presence, about control, about seeing and being seen. "I'll go," he said finally. But I go alone. The decision shocked everyone. Sending an unarmed diplomat into the heart of a warrior culture seemed like suicide, but Daniel insisted. He knew that bringing weapons, guards, or tech would be seen as distrust or worse, arrogance. The Cathari valued purity and ritual. Any show of force would taint the trial. Preparations moved quickly. Within 48 hours, Daniel was aboard a civilian shuttle bound for New Geneva. From there, he would transfer to the Cathari vessel. No weapons, no armor. Just the clothes on his back and a small datapad loaded with cultural notes. As the shuttle lifted off, he didn't look back at Earth. He closed his eyes and practiced his breathing. Slow, steady, calm. When he arrived at the orbital station, Vraktor was waiting. The warlord studied him with those glowing eyes, then grunted, a sound that, according to Daniel's research, meant mild surprise. "You are the champion?" Vraktor asked. "I am the representative of Earth," Daniel replied, speaking in halting but accurate Cathari. "I come not to fight your warrior, but to understand your trial." Vraktor's lips curled slightly. Not a smile. Cathari didn't smile, but something close to interest. "Then you will learn quickly, or you will fall quickly." The Cathari shuttle that carried Daniel to their homeworld was cold and dim, its walls lined with ancient carvings of past duels. He sat in silence for the entire journey, watching stars blur past. He didn't sleep. He didn't eat much. He simply prepared his mind. He knew what awaited him on Kethar Prime. Jagged mountains, blood-red skies, and an arena where thousands would watch, waiting for him to fail. But more than that, he knew the real battle wouldn't be with fists or blades. It would be with perception, with meaning, with the quiet space between action and intention. And as the shuttle descended through the crimson clouds of an alien world, Daniel Hayes took a deep breath, straightened his posture, and reminded himself of one simple truth. Sometimes, the loudest statement is made in silence. The shuttle landed on a plateau of black stone, its engines sighing to a stop as red dust swirled around the landing struts. Daniel stepped out alone, his boots crunching on the sharp gravel. The air was thin and dry, carrying the scent of iron and something faintly like burnt spice. Above him, the sky burned a deep crimson, lit by two suns that hung low on the horizon like watching eyes. In the distance, jagged spires of rock pierced the clouds, their surfaces carved with symbols that pulsed faintly with inner light. No one greeted him. No guards, no ceremony, just silence and wind. He stood there for a full minute, letting the world settle around him. Then, from the shadows between two stone pillars, a figure emerged. Tall, lean, wrapped in gray robes that fluttered like smoke. It was not Vraktor. This one moved with quiet grace, not the heavy stride of a warrior. "You are the human," the figure said in smooth, precise Cathari. His voice was calm, almost gentle. "I am," Daniel replied. "I am Kyle," the robed figure said, "keeper of the trial. You will follow me." Daniel did as he was told. They walked down a narrow path cut into the mountainside, winding deeper into the heart of the plateau. The silence was heavy but not hostile. It felt like the land itself was holding its breath. After 20 minutes, they reached a circular chamber hollowed from the rock. Inside, a single basin of still water sat in the center, reflecting the red sky above. "Bathe," Kale said. "You will enter the arena clean of Earth's touch." Daniel stripped off his clothes and stepped into the water. It was cold but clear. He washed slowly, methodically, not out of ritual but respect. When he emerged, Kale handed him a set of simple robes, undyed, seamless, made of a fabric that felt like woven air. Then came the blade. It was not a weapon in the human sense. Long and thin, with a dull edge and no point, it was more like a ceremonial rod than a sword. The hilt was smooth stone carved with a single spiral. "This is the Vorketh," Kale said. "It does not cut." "It reveals," Daniel took it carefully. It felt light, almost weightless. "What does it reveal?" "The truth of the one who holds it," Kyle answered. "And the one who faces it." They walked again, this time toward a great opening in the rock. As they neared, the sound of voices grew, low, rhythmic, like a distant drumbeat made of breath. Then the path opened onto a vast amphitheater, carved into the mountain itself. Thousands of Cathari filled the stone benches, their scales glinting in the twin suns. Not a single one spoke. They simply watched. At the center of the arena stood a raised dais of white stone. On it waited an old Cathari male, his frame bent with age but his posture unbowed. His scales were faded, almost silver, and his eyes held the weight of centuries. He wore no armor, only a simple sash across his chest marked with 7 black rings, the symbol of kingship. Kale stopped at the edge of the arena. "That is Zorvan," he whispered. "King of the 7 clans, he has not entered the trial circle in 50 cycles." Daniel's breath caught. He had expected a champion, a warrior, a general, maybe even Vractor himself. Not the king. This changed everything. To face a ruler in ritual combat was not just a test of strength. It was a challenge to the soul of the entire species. "Why him?" Daniel asked quietly. "Because you came alone," Kyle said. "Because you spoke our tongue. Because you did not bring weapons. The king sees in you something rare. Or foolish. He will decide which." Before Daniel could respond, a deep gong sounded from the highest tier of the arena. The crowd rose as one, then knelt, not to him but to the king. Then they sat again, utterly still. Kale placed a hand on Daniel's shoulder. "Walk, do not speak. Do not bow. The trial begins when you step onto the white stone." Daniel nodded. He adjusted his grip on the Vorketh and walked forward. His footsteps echoed in the silence. Every eye followed him, but he kept his gaze fixed on the king. The distance felt endless, yet he reached the dais in moments. Zorvan studied him. Not with anger, not with pride, but with something close to curiosity. Then, without a word, the king raised his own Vorketh, a blade identical to Daniel's, though its hilt was darker, worn smooth by time. The rules of the trial were never spoken aloud. They were known: 2 stand, 2 move. 2 seek the moment when one yields, not in body but in spirit. To strike with intent to harm was forbidden. To flee was shame. Victory came not from overpowering, but from presence so complete that the other could no longer stand in its light. Daniel bowed slightly, not in submission, but in acknowledgement. The king gave the barest nod in return. Then the dance began. It started with a single step. The king shifted his weight, and Daniel mirrored him. Not copying, but harmonizing. Their movements were slow at first, circling, testing, breathing in time with the wind. The Cathari believed that breath was the first language, and in this circle, it was the only one that mattered. Minutes passed. Sweat beaded on Daniel's brow, but he did not wipe it away. His arms ached from holding the blade steady, but he did not lower it. The king's eyes never left his, and in them, Daniel saw not malice, but a deep, ancient weariness. Then, without warning, Zorvan moved. It was not a lunge or a slash. It was a sudden shift, a feint designed to break rhythm. Most would have flinched. Daniel did not. He flowed with the motion, turning his body just enough to let the king's momentum carry past him. The crowd stirred, a soft rustle like dry leaves. The king paused. Then he smiled. A tiny lift at the corner of his mouth, the first expression Daniel had seen on any Cathari face. They circled again. Faster now. The king's steps grew sharper, his stance lower. Daniel matched him, drawing on years of Tai Chi practice, on the quiet discipline of meditation, on every moment he'd spent listening instead of speaking. He wasn't fighting the king. He was listening to him, another feint, another shift. This time Daniel stepped inside the king's guard, not to attack but to stand close, so close their robes brushed. He raised his Vorketh, not toward the king's throat, but to the space just beneath his jaw, where the pulse of life beat faintly beneath the scales. He pressed the dull tip gently against the skin. The king froze. In that moment, the entire arena held its breath. No one moved. No one blinked. The king's eyes widened, not in fear but in recognition. He had been seen. Not as a ruler, not as a warrior, but as a being, fragile, mortal, and tired. Daniel did not push harder. He did not speak. He simply held the blade in place, offering the king a choice: resist and break the ritual, or accept and be undone. Zorvan closed his eyes. Then slowly he lowered his own blade to the ground. A gasp rippled through the crowd, not of outrage but of awe. For the first time in living memory, a king had yielded in the trial circle, not to a stronger arm but to a quieter truth. Daniel withdrew his blade and stepped back. He bowed deeply this time, not to the king but to the moment. The gong sounded again, low and final. The trial was over. Kyle appeared at the edge of the dais, his face unreadable. He helped the king to his feet, though Zorvan waved him off after a moment. The old ruler turned to Daniel one last time. "You did not come to win," the king said in halting English. his voice rough but clear. "No," Daniel replied. "I came to understand." The king nodded, then turned and walked slowly from the arena, his steps heavier than before. The crowd parted for him in silence. Daniel stood alone on the white stone, the red suns casting long shadows behind him. He had not thrown a punch. He had not drawn blood, but something had ended here today, and something else had just begun. The silence after the trial was heavier than before. Daniel stood on the white stone dais, his bare feet cold against the smooth surface, the ceremonial blade still in his hand. Around him, the amphitheater remained utterly still. Not a whisper, not a rustle of scales. Thousands of Kethari watched, their amber eyes fixed on him not with anger or shame, but with something deeper, something like wonder. He did not move. He waited. He knew that in this culture the end of a ritual was not marked by cheers or declarations, but by the slow return of breath to the world, and so he breathed with them. In, out, steady, calm. After what felt like an hour but was likely only minutes, a single figure rose from the highest tier of the arena. It was Lyraveth, the king's daughter, her silver-blue scales catching the red light like polished metal. She descended the stone steps slowly, her movements deliberate, her gaze never leaving Daniel. When she reached the edge of the dais, she stopped and bowed, not deeply but with clear respect. "The trial is witnessed," she said in clear Kethari. "The circle is closed." Daniel lowered his blade and offered it to her, hilt first. She did not take it. Instead, she turned and gestured toward a narrow path leading away from the arena, into the heart of the mountain. "Come," she said. "The king wishes to speak before the sun set." Daniel followed. The crowd parted without a sound, forming a corridor of stillness. As he walked, he felt no fear, only a quiet exhaustion, not of the body but of the spirit. He had given everything in that circle, not through force but through presence, and now he would face the consequence. They entered a chamber carved deep into the rock, lit by soft blue crystals embedded in the walls. The air was cool and smelled of old parchment and dried herbs. King Zorvan sat on a low stone bench wrapped in a dark cloak, his breathing shallow. He looked older now, as if the trial had drained decades from him in minutes. He motioned for Daniel to sit across from him. Lyraveth stood by the entrance, silent guard. "You knew," the king said, his voice weaker than before. "You knew what the Vorketh truly is." Daniel nodded. "It is not a weapon. It is a mirror," the king smiled faintly. "Yes, and you held it up without flinching. Most who face me seek to prove their strength. You sought only to see me." "I came to understand your people," Daniel said, "not to defeat them." Zorvan closed his eyes for a long moment. "For 50 cycles, no one has entered the circle with clean hands. Warriors came with rage in their hearts. Diplomats came with lies on their tongues. You came with nothing, and that is why you won." He opened his eyes again, and there was no bitterness in them, only peace. "In our oldest texts, it is written that the greatest victory is the one that ends without a wound. You have given me that gift." Daniel did not know what to say, so he said nothing. He simply sat and let the silence speak for him. After a while, the king leaned forward slightly. "My time is short. The trial. It was my last act as king. By yielding, I have passed the burden to my daughter. She will lead the Kethari now." Lyraveth bowed her head but did not speak. Zorvan turned back to Daniel. "Tell your people this, we do not fear strength. We fear emptiness. Many species come with ships and guns and loud words, but their hearts are hollow. You are full, quiet but full." He reached out a trembling hand and touched the sleeve of Daniel's robe. "You may stay here tonight. Tomorrow you will return to your world, and you will carry our answer to the conquered." Daniel nodded. "Thank you." The king leaned back, his breath slowing. "Rest now, human. You have earned it." Lyraveth led Daniel to a small chamber nearby, lined with soft furs and glowing stones. There was no door, only a curtain of woven fibers. She left him with a bowl of clear water and a piece of dried fruit. He ate slowly, then lay down. Sleep came quickly, deeper than he expected. In his dreams, he saw the white stone dais, the red sky, and the king's eyes full of stars. He woke as the twin suns dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in violet and gold. A Kethari attendant brought him fresh robes and guided him to a high balcony overlooking the valley. Below, the city of Kethar Prime stirred to life. Lanterns lit, voices low, the hum of a civilization beginning its night. Lyraveth joined him moments later. She wore a new sash now, marked with 8 rings. the symbol of rulership. "My father passed at dawn," she said softly. His heart gave out as he slept. He was at peace. Daniel bowed his head. "I am sorry. Do not be," she said. "He chose his end, and you gave him a worthy one." They stood in silence for a while, watching the stars appear one by one in the darkening sky. "You will speak for us at the conquered," she said finally, "not as a conqueror but as a witness." "I will," Daniel promised. She turned to him, her eyes sharp but kind. "Then know this, the Cathari do not give trust easily, but once given it is unbreakable. You have it now." Before dawn, a shuttle arrived to take him back to orbit. This time it was not cold or dim. The interior was warm, lined with soft cloth, and a small tray held water and bread. As the ship lifted off, Daniel looked down one last time at the red world below. The arena was just a dark circle now, almost invisible. He thought of the king, of the blade that did not cut, of the silence that spoke louder than any war cry. Back aboard New Geneva, Earth's leaders waited in anxious silence. When Daniel stepped off the shuttle, they rushed forward with questions. Was he hurt? Did he win? What happened? He looked at them calm and tired and said only, "The trial is over. The Cathari accept us." No one understood, not fully. But they saw the change in him. The weight he carried was not of victory but of understanding. And in the days that followed, as messages flew between Earth and Kether Prime, as the Galactic Conquered prepared for an emergency session, one truth became clear. Humanity had not entered the stars through fire or force. They had walked in quietly with open hands and steady breath, and the galaxy for the first time listened. The news spread faster than light, not through official channels but through whispers between ships, coded bursts between outposts and hushed conversations in spaceport bars from Vega to Tau Ceti. The humans had faced the Cathari trial. They had not brought weapons. They had not shouted. And somehow, impossibly, they had won, not by killing but by standing still. Even stranger, the Cathari king was dead, and his daughter now ruled, calling for peace with Earth. The galaxy did not know what to make of it. On New Geneva, Daniel Hayes was given a private suite, medical checks, and a dozen debriefings, but he spoke little. When asked how he defeated the king, he only said, "I didn't defeat him. I saw him." The generals frowned. The diplomats leaned in closer. No one fully understood, but they felt the weight of his words. Meanwhile, the Galactic Concord convened an emergency summit. Delegates from over 40 species gathered in the Grand Chamber, a vast dome floating in neutral space between 3 star systems. The air hummed with tension. Many species had long viewed humanity as loud, young, and reckless. The Cathari, however, were ancient, feared, and respected. If they now called humans worthy, the balance of power shifted. Daniel was summoned to speak. Not as a soldier, not as a politician, but as the one who had walked into the trial circle and returned with silence instead of blood. He arrived alone, wearing simple gray clothes, no medals, no insignia. The chamber fell quiet as he stepped onto the central platform. Before him sat beings of every shape, crystalline minds from Xylos, insectoid hive ambassadors from Velnar, gas-bag diplomats from the Helios Drift. All watched him with eyes that had seen centuries pass. Lyraveth stood at the Cathari delegation's station, her posture regal, her gaze steady on him. She gave a small nod. He returned it. Then the speaker of the Concord, a tall, feathered being from the Andor system, asked the question everyone wanted answered. "Human, you entered the trial of blood. The Cathari king is dead." "Did you kill him?" Daniel took a breath. "No." A murmur rippled through the chamber. "The trial is not about killing," Daniel continued, his voice calm but clear. "It is about truth." The king was old. He carried the weight of his people for too long. In the circle, I did not fight him. I stood with him, and in that stillness he saw his own end and accepted it. He paused, then added, "His heart stopped not from a blade, but from peace." Silence returned, deeper this time. The speaker tilted its head. "You claim victory without violence?" "I claim understanding," Daniel said. "The Cathari do not measure strength in how hard you strike, but in how clearly you see. I saw their king, and he saw me." From the Cathari station, Lyraveth stepped forward. "What the human says is true," she announced, her voice ringing through the chamber. My father chose his end. He was not shamed. He was honored, and he named humanity worthy before he passed. She turned to face the full assembly. For 50 cycles, we tested species through combat. Many won with force, none won with silence. The humans did not come to prove they were strong. They came to prove they were ready, and they were. A delegate from the Zenthar hive, a cluster of shimmering orbs, pulsed softly. This changes the meaning of the trial. It does, Lyraveth agreed. Perhaps it was always meant to. The debate lasted for hours. Some species argued that humanity's victory was invalid. No blood, no true test. Others said that if the Cathari accepted it, the Concord must as well. A few, like the warlike Drakthar, scoffed openly, calling humans cowards who tricked an old king into surrender. But then an unexpected voice spoke. It was Elder Miro of the Lumina, a gentle, light-based species known for their wisdom and neutrality. We have watched Earth for decades, Miro said, their form glowing faintly. They send songs into the void. They rescue strangers in deep space. They argue fiercely among themselves, yet still share food with enemies. Perhaps their strength is not in arms, but in heart. That tipped the scale. By the end of the session, a vote was called. Membership in the Galactic Concord required a 2/3 majority. When the tally came in, it passed, not by a wide margin, but enough. Humanity was back on Earth. Celebrations erupted. Cities lit up with holographic stars. Children waved flags with the Concord's spiral symbol. Politicians gave speeches about a new era. But Daniel did not join them. He stood on the observation deck of New Geneva, watching Earth turn below, blue and fragile. Lyraveth found him there. You do not celebrate, she said. I'm not sure what we've won, he replied. Membership? Or a test that never ends? She stood beside him. Both. The Concord is not a prize. It is a promise. To listen, to learn, to stand when others run. He looked at her. Your father would be proud. He would, she said. He saw in you what we had forgotten. That honor is not taken. It is given. They stood in silence for a long time. Two beings from different worlds, bound not by war but by a moment of quiet truth. Later that week, Daniel received a message from Earth's leadership. They wanted to name him ambassador to the Concord, a permanent role with full authority. He accepted, but only on one condition: that Earth send no soldiers to Kether Prime, no weapons, no surveillance drones. Only teachers, healers, and listeners. The request surprised them, but they agreed. In the months that followed, human scientists shared clean energy designs with Cathari engineers. Cathari historians taught Earth scholars the lost songs of their ancestors. Trade began, not of weapons or resources, but of stories, art, and medicine. And Daniel Hayes, the quiet diplomat who had walked into an alien arena with nothing but a dull blade and steady breath, became something new. Not a hero, not a legend, but a bridge the galaxy still watched. Some doubted. Some waited for humanity to show its true violent nature. But with each passing cycle, Earth proved that strength could be soft, that courage could be calm, and that sometimes the most powerful thing a being could do was simply stand still and see. And in the halls of the Concord, when new species petitioned for membership, the story was always told of the human who faced a king, drew no blood, and changed the stars forever. Years passed. The stars did not change, but the way beings moved among them did. Earth was no longer a lonely voice calling into the dark. It was part of the conversation now, a quiet but steady presence in the Galactic Concord. Trade routes opened. Cultural exchanges flourished. Human music drifted through alien cities, and Cathari poetry found its way into Earth's schools. The galaxy had not been conquered. It had been joined. Daniel Hayes lived in a small residence on New Geneva, not because he had to, but because he chose to. His title was Ambassador of Earth to the Conquered, but he rarely used it. He wore no uniform, carried no badge, and gave no grand speeches. He preferred walking the station's quiet corridors, listening more than speaking, watching more than acting. The other ambassadors, many centuries old, had come to respect him, not for his power, but for his patience. Lyraveth ruled the Cathari with a steady hand. She ended the old practice of ritual combat for membership trials, replacing it with something new, the trial of presence. Species now had to send a representative to sit in silence with a Cathari elder for one full cycle of their homeworld. No words, no gestures. Just shared stillness. Many failed. But those who passed earned not just membership, but deep trust. The change had started with Daniel. And everyone knew it. One evening, as the twin suns of a nearby system cast long shadows through the observation lounge, Daniel received a visitor. It was a young human named Leo Martinez, fresh from Earth's diplomatic academy. He had studied Daniel's story for years. To him, Daniel was a myth made real, the man who faced a king and won without striking a blow. Leo stood nervously at the door. Ambassador Hayes, I was assigned to assist you. Daniel looked up from his tea. Call me Daniel. And come in. Leo stepped inside, eyes wide at the simplicity of the room, just a desk, a chair, a shelf of books, and a single window showing the endless stars. No trophies, no hollows of past victories. Nothing to show the man had changed history. You're not what I expected, Leo said. Daniel smiled faintly. What did you expect? Someone. Bigger, louder. Loudness is easy, Daniel said. Silence takes work. He offered Leo a seat. They talked for hours, not about politics or treaties, but about listening. About how to sit with someone who is angry without becoming angry yourself. About how to speak a language not with words, but with breath and posture. Leo took notes, but Daniel told him to put the pad away. Understanding doesn't live in data, he said. It lives in stillness. Over the next few months, Leo followed Daniel to meetings, not to speak, but to watch. He saw how Daniel never interrupted, even when others shouted. How he waited 3 full minutes after a heated argument, before offering a single sentence that calmed the room. How he once spent an entire session with a grieving Velnari delegate just sitting beside them, saying nothing until the delegate finally whispered, "Thank you for staying." Leo began to understand. Then came the Drakthar crisis. The Drakthar were a proud, warlike species who had long resented humanity's quick rise in the conquered. They claimed Earth had cheated its way in, that the Cathari had been weakened by age and sentiment. When a Drakthar patrol ship vanished near human space, they blamed Earth without evidence. Tensions rose. Warships gathered on both sides. The Concord called an emergency session. Most expected violence. The Drakthar ambassador, a hulking figure named Gorvax, demanded Earth surrender its outer colonies as punishment. Human delegates argued back, voices sharp with fear and pride. The chamber buzzed with anger. Then Daniel stood. He did not raise his voice. He simply walked to the center of the floor and faced Gorvax. "I did not know your ship was missing," Daniel said. "But if it is in human space, we will help you find it." "Not because we owe you, but because it is right," Gorvax sneered. "Words are wind, human." "Then let us walk together," Daniel replied. "Send your people with ours. Search every sector. If we find your ship, we return it. If we find your crew, we heal them. If we find nothing, we mourn with you." Silence fell. No one had offered to share a search with the Drakthar in decades. They were known for betrayal, for turning help into traps. Gorvax stared at Daniel for a long time. Then he said, "Why would you do this?" "Because my people once lost ships in the dark," Daniel said. "And no one came to look." Something shifted in Gorvax's eyes. Not trust, not yet, but a crack in the wall. The search began a week later. Human and Drakthar vessels combed the border zones together. After 10 days, they found the ship, drifting, damaged by a micrometeor storm, its crew alive but injured. Human medics treated them. Drakthar engineers helped repair the hull. When the crew returned home, they spoke of kindness, not conquest. Gorvax never apologized. But at the next Concord meeting, he nodded to Daniel, a small gesture but one that meant everything. After that, fewer species doubted Earth. More came to listen. Daniel's way, quiet, steady, rooted in respect, became a new kind of diplomacy. Not the only way, but a needed one. Years turned into decades. Leo Martinez became an ambassador himself, carrying Daniel's lessons to new worlds. Lyra Veth's children learned human songs. Earth built its first joint research station with the Lumina. The galaxy did not become perfect. Conflict still flared, but now there was always one voice that asked, "What if we just sit together first?" Daniel grew older. His hair turned white. His steps slowed, but his presence remained strong. He never wrote a memoir. He never gave interviews. When asked how he changed the stars, he always said the same thing. "I didn't. I just showed up and paid attention." One clear night, as he stood on the same observation deck where he'd once watched Earth after the trial, Lyra Veth joined him. She was older too, her scales dulled by time but her eyes still sharp. "They will tell your story for generations," she said. "Let them tell the truth," he replied. "Not about me. About what happens when we stop trying to win and start trying to see." She placed a hand on his shoulder. "You gave us back our soul, Daniel. We had forgotten how to be still." He smiled. "And you taught me that silence can be a gift." They watched the stars together, two old friends from different worlds, bound by a moment that had reshaped everything. And far below, on Earth, children looked up at the night sky and knew they were not alone. Not because of weapons or speed, but because one quiet man had walked into an alien arena, said nothing, and changed the universe forever.